An HOA officer publicly branded a quiet resident, Marcus Wheeler, as a cyber threat, turning his own neighborhood against him. But Greg Aldridge didn't know Marcus was a federal cyber agent with the law on his side. With one precise legal move, Marcus flipped the entire situation. And just wait until you hear how this battle ended, with justice served in the most satisfying way. When Marcus Wheeler moved back home after 10 years away, he wasn't planning to make waves. At 32, Marcus had built a life most people would never see coming. He worked deep inside federal law enforcement, specializing in one of the toughest and most invisible battlegrounds: cyber crime. The kind that wrecks hospitals, pipelines, even entire city networks. But that wasn't public knowledge. Not in Willowbrook Estates, the quiet gated community where his parents lived. To the neighbors, Marcus was just that tall guy with the laptop who sometimes worked from the park or the back porch. They didn't ask questions, and Marcus didn't offer answers. He liked it that way. At least, he did until Greg Aldridge showed up. Greg was the newest self-appointed enforcer of HOA standards. A man in his early 50s who wore mirrored sunglasses rain or shine, with a starched polo that might as well have said authority complex. Nobody had voted for him. He'd simply been appointed by the HOA board when the previous compliance officer retired. And in 2 short months, Greg had transformed from a helpful neighbor to the self-declared sheriff of Willowbrook. And Greg loved spotting what he called violations. That Thursday morning was windy and cool, one of those crisp days where sitting outside with a coffee and laptop felt just right. Marcus had a major operation running. His task force was monitoring an international ransomware ring that had just been flushed into the open. He couldn't leave his post, but he could at least do the work from a shady park bench beneath an old oak. At exactly 10:17 a.m., Marcus looked up and saw Greg approaching. Fast, purposeful stride, arms swinging, the kind of walk that made everyone nearby glance away. Greg stopped in front of Marcus's bench and planted his feet. "You can't be here." Marcus blinked. "Excuse me?" "You're not a homeowner, and with that equipment," Greg gestured broadly at the open laptop and Marcus's secure phone, "you're a security threat to this community." Marcus closed the laptop gently, not missing a beat. "I live here, with my parents, and I'm working. Perfectly legal." Greg wasn't satisfied. "We've had complaints," he said, lowering his voice. "People like you, sitting around with strange devices. I'm flagging you as a potential cyber criminal. You'll be banned from all HOA property effective immediately." Before Marcus could say another word, Greg whipped out his phone. Snap! One picture of Marcus. Snap! One picture of the laptop. Snap! A close-up of Marcus's ID lanyard, which displayed only his first name and an FBI-secured QR code. Marcus's eyes narrowed. "I wouldn't do that if I were you." But Greg was already strutting away, phone in hand, a smug grin on his face. 2 hours later, it started. An official email hit every inbox in the neighborhood. Notice: an individual was observed conducting unauthorized surveillance in the community park this morning. HOA compliance officer Greg Aldridge has flagged this person as a potential cyber threat. Residents are advised to avoid contact and report further suspicious behavior immediately. By the time Marcus returned home, his parents were waiting anxiously in the living room. Elaine, his mother, was pale. "Marcus, neighbors are talking. Someone told me in the market that our son might be one of those hackers." Tom, his father, a retired police captain, looked furious but controlled. "Son, did something happen this morning?" Marcus exhaled slowly, feeling the first flicker of something he didn't often feel. Not on the job, not even tracking criminals halfway across the world. Personal violation. This wasn't a professional case. This was his name, his family, in their own neighborhood, being dragged into public suspicion by a man with no clue what line he had just crossed. And the worst part? Greg wasn't finished. Greg Aldridge was savoring the spotlight. Over the weekend, he practically held court in the neighborhood, walking block to block with his HOA clipboard under one arm, stopping to chat with anyone who would listen. "You folks can relax," he'd say with a knowing smile. "I spotted a serious cyber threat the other day in the park. Took steps to protect everyone." Neighbors, already rattled by the official HOA email, leaned in eagerly. Some nodded in approval. A few whispered about Marcus as that tech guy no one really knew. Greg loved every second of it, but it wasn't enough for him to warn the community. Now it was personal. On Monday morning, after an early workout, Marcus returned home. He grabbed a bottle of water from the kitchen, then noticed something fluttering on the front door. He pulled it down, a crisp sheet of paper, freshly taped, notice of trespass. The individual known as Marcus Wheeler is hereby prohibited from entering or utilizing any HOA-managed common areas, effective immediately. Violators will be subject to enforcement action and penalties. Marcus stood silently, reading it twice. Not just an email this time. Now his name, printed and posted for anyone to see. A public label of criminal trespass. He heard footsteps behind him. It was his mother, Elaine, clutching her phone. Her face was pale again. "Marcus, Greg just called me." "What did he say?" Marcus asked calmly. Her voice trembled. "He said we'll face fines if the man living in your home doesn't stop unauthorized computer activities." "He said the board is considering further action." That was when Tom, Marcus's father, stepped into the room. He'd been listening from the hallway. A retired police captain, Tom Wheeler knew when a line had been crossed. He sat down across from Marcus at the kitchen table. "Son," Tom said quietly, steady as a rock, "I know you don't like to flash your credentials. I know you've always kept a low profile here. But this man, Greg, he's getting dangerous. He's trying to smear you as a criminal, and now he's threatening your mother." Marcus exhaled slowly, leaning back in his chair. His eyes had the same calm focus they did when leading operations for the Bureau, but beneath that calm was a tightening coil. "Dad, I've already filed the initial report through the Bureau," he said evenly. "Greg is on record now. That email, that notice, and this phone call." He paused, gaze sharpening. "But now I think it's time to end this." What Greg still didn't know, what no one in Willowbrook had guessed, was that the quiet man with the laptop wasn't just some work-from-home tech guy. Marcus Wheeler was one of the lead cyber agents in an FBI task force, tracking global ransomware networks, coordinating with Interpol, and building federal cases that reached straight into criminal empires. He dealt with international syndicates for a living. Greg Aldridge was about to find out what happened when you targeted someone like that and tried to drag their family through the mud. Marcus stood, calm, certain. It was time to turn the tables, legally, surgically, and with precision. By Wednesday morning, Marcus Wheeler had everything prepared. He wasn't a man prone to emotional outbursts. Years in federal service had taught him the value of precise, measured action. But there were moments, like this one, when patience turned into controlled determination. At exactly 10 a.m., an official cease and desist letter, drafted by an FBI bureau attorney, landed in the inboxes of both Greg Aldridge and the entire HOA board. The letter was clear. Mr. Aldridge and members of the board are hereby notified that their public statements, notices, and forum posts regarding Special Agent Marcus Wheeler constitute defamation and harassment. Failure to retract said statements and cease further defamatory activity will result in civil liability and potential criminal referral for obstruction and impersonation of law enforcement actions. Marcus waited, watched. He knew how these things usually went. But even so, Greg's response exceeded expectations. At 12:02 p.m., a new post appeared in the Willowbrook Community Forum, authored by Greg himself. Security update. HOA stands by its assessment of a threat actor operating within the community. Residents are advised to remain vigilant. Federal intimidation attempts will not dissuade us from protecting Willowbrook Estates. The words hung in the air like smoke. Marcus leaned back, eyes narrowing. Now, Greg had made his final mistake, doubling down in a public, documented forum after receiving a federal legal notice. The implications were serious. Not only had Greg escalated the defamation, he had now openly accused a federal agent of intimidation, something that could easily be construed as obstruction of justice. Marcus moved quickly. He contacted the FBI Office of Public Affairs and briefed them in detail. An official public clarification was arranged. The Bureau would issue a formal statement addressing the misuse of cyber threat terminology by untrained non-law enforcement actors, and reinforcing that Special Agent Wheeler was conducting lawful, federally sanctioned work. But Marcus wasn't finished. Next, he reached out to the HOA's insurance provider, specifically the firm underwriting the board's directors and officers' D&O liability policy. His message was simple and backed by legal precedent. Greg Aldridge's continued defamatory conduct, after formal notice, created material liability exposure for the entire board. Should Marcus pursue civil action, or should federal charges proceed, the insurer could be on the hook for damages. By Friday morning, the impact was clear. The board's insurer, now fully aware of the legal storm brewing, took immediate action. They froze the board's D&O coverage pending an internal review. Without that protection, every board member, and Greg himself, now faced personal liability for any legal damages arising from the defamation case. The dominoes were falling. At noon sharp, Greg's phone rang. "Mr. Aldridge, this is Special Agent Maria Velasquez with the Federal Bureau of Investigation. We need to speak regarding your false public statements about a federal agent currently operating under Bureau authority." The call was brief, professional, and delivered with the full weight of federal authority. And the effect was immediate. That afternoon, several neighbors reported seeing Greg Aldridge pacing nervously outside his house, phone still in hand. His usual confident stride was gone, replaced by hurried glances and a pale, unsettled expression. The man who had strutted through the neighborhood boasting of protecting the community had just realized he was no longer the one in control, and Marcus Wheeler wasn't done yet. By the time Monday morning arrived, the atmosphere in Willowbrook Estates had changed completely. What had begun as one man's arrogant campaign was now unraveling in full view of the community, and with federal attention squarely on the HOA board. Behind the scenes, the board members were in panic mode. Their D&O coverage was frozen, meaning every one of them now faced potential personal liability if Marcus filed suit, which by all appearances was imminent. Their legal counsel, after reviewing the situation, delivered a blunt assessment. "You will lose, you will pay damages, and unless you act immediately to mitigate exposure, this will get worse." That same morning, at exactly 9:03 a.m., a formal message was distributed to every resident in Willowbrook. Correction: recent statements regarding Mr. Marcus Wheeler were false and made without cause. Mr. Wheeler is a law-abiding resident and a federal agent engaged in lawful duties. We regret any harm caused to him and his family. It was a complete public retraction and apology, exactly what Marcus's attorney had required, and the fallout didn't stop there. Under pressure from legal counsel and facing growing backlash from residents, the board convened a closed meeting that afternoon. The outcome was swift. Greg Aldridge was forced to resign his position as HOA compliance officer. As part of the settlement arranged through the board's legal team, Greg signed an agreement stating that he would be permanently barred from holding any enforcement or leadership role within Willowbrook Estates. By the end of the day, his name was removed from official rosters. His forum privileges were suspended, and in the space of a single week, Greg's self-created narrative of protecting the community had collapsed entirely. For Marcus Wheeler, the storm passed with the same quiet professionalism he had brought to every stage of the conflict. Neighbors who had once avoided the Wheelers now stopped Marcus on walks or at the market, offering apologies, sometimes sheepishly, sometimes with genuine curiosity. One older gentleman summed it up best: "We're sorry about how this went down, Mr. Wheeler. You seem to know a lot more than anyone gave you credit for." Marcus's answer was always the same, calm, modest, with a slight smile: "Just protecting people. Sometimes from the bad guys online, sometimes from overzealous HOA officers." He never elaborated, but in a community where word traveled fast, that was enough. As for Greg Aldridge, the man who once strutted through the neighborhood in mirrored sunglasses was now a subdued figure. Neighbors noticed the for sale sign go up on his property just days later. His car was seen packed for several weekends. The sunglasses were gone. And by month's end, Greg, and his misplaced sense of authority, had quietly left Willowbrook. Justice served, quietly, decisively. And the next time someone in Willowbrook Estates considered labeling a neighbor a threat without cause, they would remember exactly how this story ended.